right, hi everyone. Welcome and thank you all so much for coming today. My name is Rachel Kitsey-Collins. I'm an attorney at Lockridge, Brindle, Nowen, and co-president of the Minneapolis-St. Paul chapter of the American Constitution Society. Let me first thank Lockridge, Brindle, Nowen for providing this space for the event. It is great to have so many people here in person and on Zoom. ACS is very excited to be hosting this candidate forum for the Hennepin County Attorney race. For those of you who aren't familiar with ACS, we are the nation's foremost progressive legal organization with over 250 student and lawyer chapters across the country. This candidate forum is part of ACS's Run, Vote, Work initiative focused on raising awareness of and voter engagement in state and local level elected offices, including the county attorney office. These positions are critical to the running of our elections and to protecting the guardrails of democracy. Our goal is to shine a spotlight on these critically important roles, including by hosting candidate forums such as this one. We sincerely appreciate the participation of the candidates with us here today and look forward to learning more about them. I will note that ACS is a 501c3 nonprofit, nonpartisan educational organization. We do not endorse candidates or political parties. All candidates who declared for the race were invited, and we're grateful that all of them were able to make it tonight. I'll note that while some candidates have current or former affiliations with ACS, no candidates were involved in the planning process, and topics and questions were prepared solely by myself, my co-president Adam Miller, and our moderator Tane Danger. So again, thank you all for coming. With that, I'll turn it over to Adam.
Well, good evening, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us tonight for this important discussion. As Rachel mentioned, I'm Adam Miller. I'm co-president of the Twin Cities Lawyer Chapter of the American Constitution Society. So a couple of additional notes before we get started this evening. For everyone who's attending, who is interested in finding ways to support local election integrity and our democracy, we want to encourage you to become a poll worker this election cycle. In recent years, many states and localities have struggled with a shortage of poll workers, which has resulted in long lines at the polls and even some closures at polling places. If you're interested in becoming a poll worker, a great way to do so is by taking the ACS Poll Worker Pledge at acslaw.org. Additionally, ACS has an excellent podcast called Broken Law, which you can also access at the ACS website. There are many featured episodes highlighting the important state and local elected positions, such as the one that we are here to discuss tonight. Lastly, if you are not already an ACS member, now is a great time to join. Your support enables us to put on forums such as this, as well as support many of the national and local initiatives that advance ACS's vision of the law and Constitution. Lastly, a couple ground rules before I turn it over to our moderator for the evening. The moderator will be asking all questions during this event. Second, we have a lot of candidates and a lot of ground to cover tonight. And so we ask that you please refrain from any clapping, cheering, etc. I guess unless you're at home by yourself. Lastly, for the first time in a long time, this is a truly open contest for this seat. For many people viewing tonight, this will be the first time hearing directly from the candidates. This race and the next person to occupy the Hennepin County Attorney's Office will face serious challenges starting on day one. So to help us learn more about the different candidates that are vying for this office, I am going to hand it over to our moderator for the evening, Tane Danger, who is the director of the Westminster Town Hall Forum, host of the Theater of Public Policy. For those that know Tane, he is a familiar face in the ACS circle. So with that, I'll hand it over to him.
Yay! Oh yeah, everyone's taking the donut plot very seriously. That's good. Hi, everybody. Very excited to be here. I am also absolutely thrilled to be able to be part of this. I think this is a really important conversation and it's a good opportunity to hear from these different candidates. My goal for tonight is to help you all, folks who are here in the room watching, and especially folks all over who are in Hennepin County watching this, learn more about each of these candidates and hopefully start to notice some differences in how they would approach this really critical role so that you all can make a really good decision as we go into an election later this summer and fall. So we are actually going to get started with an opportunity for each of the candidates to introduce themselves. And to do that, I actually wanted to ask, because we have faces up here that may or may not be familiar to some folks, folks up here who have served in or are even serving now in some very important roles. And yet today's race is about Hennepin County Attorney. And so to start, I wanted to ask each of the candidates to introduce themselves and say a little bit about why they are running for this office in particular, and what it is about this office that they believe they can do something that they either aren't able to do where they are now or haven't been able to do in the past. And so we're going to give each candidate 90 seconds to do that. And I will start all the way down at the other end, and then in this case, we will just work all our way back up here if that's all right with you. So without further ado, I will turn it over to you.
Good evening. My name is Martha Holton Dimick, and I just retired as a Hennepin County District Court judge 3 months ago to run for this position. I grew up in the inner city of Milwaukee, the third of 9 children. And just when I was about to enter Marquette and study psychology, I got pregnant and my world turned upside down. Pretty soon I was raising a young daughter, working weekends as a nursing assistant, and I wasn't able to make ends meet. So I had to swallow my pride and get on welfare. My daughter Jocelyn and I made it through those difficult days together. I got an associate's degree in nursing, and then 2 years later, I got a bachelor's degree in nursing. I put myself to both colleges. And when my daughter got into high school, I finally realized, because the hospital that I was working at was merging with another hospital, and those of us at the newer hospital, so to speak, were not going to have a job. I was working as a home care nurse at the time, and I knew that I could support myself and my daughter for a while, but I needed to move on. So I decided to change careers and go to law school. So finally, I was able to attend my dream school, which was Marquette, only this time to go to law school. After graduating 3 years, I worked in private practice for over 8 years. In 1999, during Murderopolis, now Senator Amy Klobuchar hired me specifically to be the first community prosecutor on the North Side. And after 10 years there, we won an award because we were able to make a significant impact in the number of criminal activity that was going on at the time. And we received a national award. 10 years after I worked at the Hennepin County Attorney's Office, I was recruited by Susan Siegel. She was the city attorney at the time. She wanted me to work as her criminal deputy, in which I accepted the offer, and I managed over 60 attorneys and support staff.
Judge, we're over time, so if you have one.
It was at this time that Governor Mark Dayton appointed me to the bench. I served on the bench for about 10 years. I enjoyed my time on the bench, but after the murder of George Floyd and the increase in crime in my neighborhood, I live over north, I needed to move on. As a judge, you can impact, I'm almost done. As a judge, you can impact change in a family one at a time. And I felt like I needed to fix the whole system. And that is why I'm running for Hennepin County Attorney. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And hopefully it's clear. I will be trying to keep time. I'm trying not to have to cut people off as much as possible. Everyone up here has been probably in a situation before, either in court or elsewhere, where we're limited on time. And that is very true tonight. So with that, we'll keep moving down the line. Please go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Moriarity, and I'm running for Hennepin County Attorney because we can all have public safety and reform and a fair system. My friend Jeff Robinson directed a documentary this year called Who We Are, and it's a chronicle of racism in this country. And one of the things I remember very well is at various points in history, we have come close to transformational change, but then there was pushback, like Reconstruction, and he has a ball going up and then it just goes back down. I saw the murder of George Floyd as being that moment in history for us, but I see it going away because I see people talking about crime, which we should be talking about. Carjackings are going up as they are in every city, but we cannot go back to what we've been doing for decades and decades because it has not kept us safe. There's plenty of data on that simply punishing people has not kept us safe, and it has harmed communities in our county here. So I am running because I have tried cases for 22 years in Hennepin County. I was chief public defender for 6 years. I ran the second largest public law office in the state. The largest is the county attorney's office. In 2019, the National Center for State Courts found us to be one of the best public defender's offices in the country. I have the experience in both trial work and leadership to run this office well. Thank you.
Very much. Keep coming down.
My name is Paul Ostrow. My 100-year-old mother is still with us. Once said to me, you do as much good for as many people as you can for as long as you're alive. And really, when it gets down to it, that's why I'm running. I think this is an incredibly important election and an incredibly important position. And I do believe that the combination I have of 25 years of prosecutorial experience, but also 12 years as a leader on the Minneapolis City Council, gives me a unique perspective and unique experiences. What's sad to me is that with the murder of George Floyd, we had an opportunity to unite, but instead we're divided. What I promised to bring to the county attorney's office is someone who's going to solve problems, someone who's going to collaborate, someone who is going to unite law enforcement and the community, be somebody to bridge those divides, and someone that will love the job. So if you're asking me why am I running, I can't wait to get started. I want to do the work because I believe that my experience, coupled with the passion of other people, we can keep ourselves safe and we can also protect the civil rights of everyone in Hennepin County.
Thank you very much.
Down the line. Well, I want to first thank Team Danger for moderating this event in ACS and Minneapolis-St. Paul Lawyers Chapter. I was president for 4 terms in a row, and I'm so excited to see the chapter has grown so much. There's 112 people zooming in, and there's 40 people in the room, and I'm just so thrilled that all of you are here, engaged, and care about our community to show up. I'll give my very brief elevator pitch because it answers your question, Tane. And so I'll just go. My name is Saraswati Singh, and I'm running to be your next Hennepin County attorney. My name is pronounced Saraswati, and my last name is Singh, as in song. I say this every time because I want you to vote for me. The Hennepin County attorney is the top prosecutor for Minneapolis and the surrounding area. I'm a prosecutor. In Ramsey County, I tried murder cases, sexual assault, domestic assault cases, and everything in between. Why am I running? I'm tired of waiting. We can get into my life story later on, but plenty of people say the right thing, but not everyone has both the life experience and the professional experience to actually make changes at the ground level and make sure that they keep going. My campaign priorities are what are my priorities and what I've learned from door knocking everywhere from North Minneapolis to Linden Hills: public safety, police accountability, and racial equity. I have the experience to get this job done. And not only that, you can probably tell I'm the youngest out of this group. I'm 37. I'm the same age as Amy Klobuchar when she first ran and won for Hennepin County Attorney. She was the first woman in that office. I'm going to be the first woman of color in this office. Thank you.
Very good. And instead of coming on down, we're making good progress here. Mr. Trautmann, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, thank you very much. And thank you to ACS for hosting this event. My name is Simon Trautmann. I'm a twice elected Richfield City Council member and attorney here in the Twin Cities, and I'm running for a number of reasons, not the least of which there were 20,611 bullets that were fired in Minneapolis in 2021. And the murder of George Floyd did not create a gap of distrust between communities of color and our law enforcement and our community, but they revealed it, like many people have mentioned here today, that we all saw this clearly with crystal clear eyes, I think for the first time in multiple generations. And I don't want to miss this generational opportunity. Tane asked, why now are you not able to accomplish what you are accomplishing currently? I'm running because of what I have been able to accomplish. In the city of Richfield, when I was elected as a Puerto Rican man, we became the first majority Latino council in state history. And we brought generational change to our city that was in earnest need of generational change. As an attorney, I represent folks, and we built a firm that I'm incredibly proud of. And we not only represent people in criminal defense situations on the worst days of their life, but we serve primarily BIPOC business owners and entrepreneurs, and we serve people on the best days of their life when they're building power and when they're building wealth. And something about this office is it's more than just a prosecutor's office. There's half the office that's a civil office, and we need procedural justice as much as we need criminal justice. And equity, if it doesn't include prosperity, is a fantasy, and that's why you should vote for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And finally, absolutely last but not least, Mr. Winkler.
Thank you, Tane, for reassuring me of that. Thank you all for being here and to ACS for hosting our first in-person forum. It's wonderful to see all of you in person and to have this conversation. It's critical that we do. This community is living through a public safety challenge that is generational in nature. For a long time, our public safety in this community has produced deep disparities based on race. We have had a safe community in certain parts of our neighborhoods for a long time. In other parts, we have not had safety at all. And when we look at replacing the current county attorney and the opportunity to start bridging communities and bringing people together, we need to look for candidates who are able to not only show up in Minneapolis and the suburbs, but in the exurbs, but to go to every part of those neighborhoods and find people of goodwill who want to come together and make their neighborhoods safer. As the majority leader of the Minnesota House of Representatives for the last 3 years, I have had an opportunity to have a direct impact in a lot of neighborhoods and with a lot of people. But at the state level, we provide funding and we change laws. I'm running for this office now because I want to have a direct impact on the way that we live in this community. If we can't find a way to come together across neighborhood lines and community lines, we can't come together across racial differences and income differences, we will be divided and a less successful place to live. We will be moving in the wrong direction. I think this election is an opportunity to show that the best elements of this community can come together and create public safety, can create greater justice, and can begin to address our systemic and long-term racial inequities that have plagued this community. I think we've all mentioned the murder of George Floyd. In many ways, that was the final collapse of a broken system. Now we are in a moment where we're going to construct something new. And I want to be part of reconstructing a public safety system that will serve all neighborhoods, all people, and all communities. And that's why I'm running for this office.
Thank you very much. Thank you to all of the candidates for that. Virtually everyone has either mentioned here in their opening statement or definitely mentions on their website the issue of public safety as one of the top priorities of this office and what you want to do. And so, as I promised to this audience when we got started, like what I'm trying to do is figure out how can we differentiate between each of you and the approaches that you would bring. So my first question for you all is just, can you please tell us how your approach would be different with specifics than any of your opponents or than what we currently see, and what that would look like in the office? And in this case, I'm going to throw the ball in the air and see who wants first bite at it. Everybody will get a chance. Yes, Councilmember Trautmann.
I'll take a first bite at it. I think there's a difference between policy reform and what I call reckoning and repair. And as a policymaker, we love policies because they're a way for us to write a memo that says we're smarter than the last person. We have a perfect example in no-knock warrants. No-knock warrants was a policy that was addressed and reformed by the city of Minneapolis. It was addressed and reformed and addressed from a policy perspective by the state legislature. But we have officers that were in the room in the tragedy when Amir Locke lost his life. And those were the same officers that fired on Jaleel Stallings. They were not held accountable. The county attorney made the decision that there was a crime that was committed, and they charged Jaleel Stallings. And two of those officers were in the room with Amir Locke. And that's the difference between reckoning with a broken system and setting about to repair it.
And so we are short on time, so I'm going to just push you to give
Sure.
me some specifics of what you would do in the office if you got there to address some of these things you're talking about.
Sure. So very specifically, when it comes to things that we've done in the city of Richfield is officer training. When it comes to constitutional and protectual stops, training officers and vetting officers is something that we can do to hold law enforcement accountable. Also, we can take seriously for the first time in county history the devastation of economic crimes that are visited on people that are rarely or never prosecuted in the office, and things like that can build trust and begin to build relationship for all people, but particularly people on the margins.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Saraswati?
I'm a prosecutor. My caseload during the pandemic quadrupled. I know there's a lot of prosecutors here in the audience. Every single prosecutor in my office, I work in Ramsey County with John Choi. Every single prosecutor, including the newbies, has a murder case. Every single one. We haven't had that happen in our office in decades. This is real. Have you ever talked to a family that has had their loved one murdered? I think we've all got a taste of it when Chauvin murdered George Floyd, but this is happening over and over again. And not only that, the prosecutors are overburdened. Do you know what the #1 type of case in Hennepin County is? In the Hennepin County Prosecutor's Office? It's drug crimes. I would move prosecutors over from the drug unit over to the violent crime unit. Why? Because those are some of the most serious cases in our system. It's taking a longer time for them to get to trial than before the pandemic. And it does something else. It addresses racial inequity. Where do we have some of the greatest inequities in our criminal justice system? It's with drugs. We're still fighting drugs, Nixon's war on drugs.
And as much as I hate cutting off the Nixon reference, I will, and thank you very much for getting to those specifics. I will just remind, we're doing about 60 seconds for each of these answers. And so again, getting to some of the specifics earlier is better. So yes, look at, we're ending up kind of going back down the line. Anyway, yes, go ahead.
Well, I'll jump in. I have a very considerable disagreement on the issues of drug prosecution. Many may not know, but the #1 cause of death in Hennepin County is not gun violence. The #1 cause of premature death in Hennepin County and in the United States is fentanyl. Almost 300 lives were lost to fentanyl. 100,000 people in this country. It is a plague, and I will aggressively prosecute anyone who is selling fentanyl to our kids, period. And I do have to ask Majority Winkler, please make sure there's a hearing on that fentanyl bill. Right now, the penalties for fentanyl, you can have enough fentanyl to kill your entire neighborhood and you won't go to prison. So that is a place where I have a disagreement. I also have a disagreement. I think we have to be careful with bail reform. I do not want people like in Brooklyn Park a couple of weeks ago out on $100,000 bail when he almost killed 2 police officers and one other person. So those are just a couple of places I have some differences.
Thank you very much. Yes, all the way down at the end. Thank you.
I consider the 80 homicides we have on over north the past 2 years. There have been in North Minneapolis since George Floyd's death, 250% increase in homicides in my neighborhood. Deshaun Hill was killed just right down the block from where I live, a couple blocks down from where I live. And if gun violence and addressing gun violence and getting guns off the streets isn't a priority for the Hennepin County Attorney's Office, then unfortunately we do have an issue. I do agree with Paul with regards to fentanyl. That is a huge issue, and I do agree with the way you want to approach it, so I'm not going to go there. I have experience dealing with crime in North Minneapolis during the Moriarity years. I got together with the police chief over or the police inspector over north. We sat down, formulated a plan, got together with neighborhood groups. It was a collaborative effort to build trust and catch people committing the crimes. You're in the community and you're active in the community. We know who's committing the crime.
And
We'll
so-
never be able to.
Because I'm gonna just, I'll give you another 15 seconds here, just in this office, going in there, can you just give us the sort of specific that this is one of the things that I would do in this particular next.
I would collaborate with everyone. That includes the police department, the neighborhoods, the mayors. We have to have input from everyone, and I want that input, and I want it positive. I'm tired of listening to naysayers criticizing the system, but never coming up with any offers of how to improve. I want people to collaborate, get together, work together, and we can come together and actually solve some of these problems if we aren't so busy criticizing one another.
Thank you very much. So I have, yes, I'll go right next to you and then come back over here.
Minneapolis Police Department apprehends 10% of people who commit carjackings, suburban-wide or county-wide, it's 24%. We need to use data. I'm very big on data to look at what tools the police need to apprehend more than that. Because as county attorney, then I can only hold 10% accountable. We need to look at that 10% and that 24% and see what the system is doing. Are they getting out right away and committing new violent crimes? If so, that's not working. I spent 30 years as a public defender sitting next to clients, some of whom had been yesterday's victim. People are hurt, they're traumatized, and we've had violence on the north side and the Powderhorn for decades. So violence is a complex question. We have to invest in community. We have to invest in violence prevention. I'm a big fan of the Office of Violence Prevention in the city. We have to invest in root causes, and we have to give our youth hope. They don't have jobs. They don't have anything to look forward to. And so my time's up. So that's a 60-second what I was supposed to do.
Thank you. And finally, coming back down here.
You asked what we would do different from what is currently happening. I think one important change in the office is to unleash the power of the attorneys in the office who know in many cases the right thing to do, but there has been a top-down structure in the county attorney's office that provides little discretion for individual attorneys to do justice in their particular cases. I think that the role of the prosecutor is to be a minister of justice, and that does not mean racking up the most number of prosecutions or the longest sentences. That means looking at every case if possible, given caseloads, and figuring out the right thing to do in that particular case. I think that's important. The other thing I think is critically important and would be different from what we see right now is engagement and being present in communities. Asking the question, what are the challenges that you're facing in your neighborhood, and what could we do to help solve those problems? It might be something a prosecutor could do. It might be something that a prosecutor can get others to do. But if you're not engaged in the community, asking questions and trying to find out what the challenges are in the neighborhood, how people are feeling, what they need in order to be safer or healthier, then we cannot be successful. That's how the world works today. You have to be engaged, and that would be very different if I were the county attorney.
So actually, you brought up something that I would love to hear from all the candidates, but just to be terribly clear about what you were saying at the top of your answer, in terms of discretion or deference to prosecutors in the office, are you saying you would give line attorneys sort of prosecutorial discretion, such as charging and settlement sentencing recommendation, if you were the attorney?
There has to be policy that applies across all divisions or in particular divisions, of course. But the level of discretion that individual attorneys can have is important. The presumption that they should be able to go to supervisors and ask for departures or to ask to settle a case or resolve a case in the interest of justice. There should be an open door policy, and the attorneys in the office should have more of a voice in setting resource and policy agendas based on their workload.
And just to pin it, but are you saying though that you ultimately would still make that decision, or are you saying that you would defer it to the line prosecutors?
Good leadership requires an obligation to listen to people who are doing the work and to take their feedback into account when making decisions and to set them up to be more successful in the work that they're doing. So in some cases, decisions have to go to the top. In a lot of cases, if you have great people working for you and you're focused on a shared mission, you can trust them to make the right decision more often.
Okay, this is something I would actually love to hear from everyone. And Moriarty, you raised your hand first, so I'll give you a chance on this question of discretion you would give line prosecutors.
Yeah, and this is an advantage I had trying cases for 20 years because I sat in chambers with prosecutors for 20 years. And there are many prosecutors over there, and they would probably say that there were many times when they said, I would like to do X, but my hands are tied. Sometimes I think that was hiding behind and not really being willing to go to a supervisor to ask for what they really wanted to do. So there are two parts of it. One is, can you depart? Is there a good reason to depart or give somebody probation or do the right thing, which is what prosecutors are supposed to do. They're not supposed to be about winning. They're supposed to represent the public safety of everybody in the community. So they're supposed to do the right thing. They're also supposed to resolve cases in a way that's fair to everybody. And what I see a lot and continue to see was cases set for trial when lawyers know that a better offer will come on the day of trial. Make that offer right away and we can clean up the trial calendar and really focus on violent crime.
So again, what was the answer? Is it yes, you would give the discretion, or it's still sort of a case by case?
So yes, but it's also a management issue, because if I say, yes, you have discretion, and then lawyers are saying, I have no discretion, I can't do anything, and I am not managing that as a supervisor and letting them hide behind something like that, I have to deal with that situation. And that's part of why I think I have an advantage having managed the second largest public law office in the state.
Okay, I did see your hand, but Mr. Ostrow did raise his hand first, so I'm going to give him a crack at this.
One of the reasons I said I was excited about doing the work is I want to empower who I think are probably an incredible group of people, not even just the attorneys, the support staff, everyone that works with Hennepin County Attorney's Office. And I agree with what Mary and Ryan said, and I've experienced this in my own work. I'm given a considerable amount of discretion in my work. And we have some of the best prosecutors in the state of Minnesota in the Hennepin County Attorney's Office. And the idea they have to beg supervisors anytime they settle a case, that doesn't empower them. So absolutely. On the other hand, I do question whether in terms of discretion, we should have certain lists of crime and say we just won't prosecute those crimes. I think that's different. But in terms of how you settle cases, I agree with Mary and Ryan. We have to give more discretion to law and prosecutors.
Judge down at the end, and then we'll come back.
I think it's really important to consider the level of experience the prosecutors have. Hennepin County right now has a large number of rather very new prosecutors. They need mentoring. They need to have someone to go to, and that is not a negative part. That's not negativity on their part. Now, the prosecutors do have discretion, and when they say that they can't go ahead and make a deal because they don't have the authority to do so, I have sent them back to their offices to get that authority, and then they come back. As a judge, that's what I've done. And then they've come back and they've had the authority. It's not like they're hiding behind anything. What they're doing is their job. We have to have a system in place. Yes, I believe the more experienced prosecutors should have the discretion to decide cases, but when they're not as experienced and they're just starting out, no, we have to have a training system in order before we allow them to go hog wild on their own, settling cases. That just isn't the way it works. And we don't just hide behind, prosecutors don't just hide behind that issue. They don't. They're out there doing what they need to do, and they do know how to go and get the authority to move on.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Singh.
Thank you. I guess I disagree with some of the other candidates. In Ramsey County, what we do is after a case is charged at the LEC, we give our best offer. And we say that, and then we get to trial. It goes over to someone like me who's on the trial team. And then defense attorneys and judges will be like, well, why can't you offer what was at the LEC? That when we say, oh, we gave you the best offer at the beginning, that's why we're not giving it to you now. I'm just saying this to show that, certain policies, you think you're going to change it and it's going to be magically better. It's not. Also, I think I'm going to give a lawyer answer. It depends. I would create a few broad policies to let the prosecutors in my office know generally what our values are, what my priorities are, and then give them the discretion and create a clear chain of command. And also just change the culture. You can have as many policies as you want on the book, or your leader can say as many things to the public, right? Come to these events. But what is it actually like? Can you actually go to your supervisor, and do they actually listen to the line prosecutor who's looking at the evidence? and knows the case the best. So I would say it depends, but I will leave it at that.
Thank you very much. And finally, yes, I'll give you a chance.
Oh, thank you. And I think a lot of good things have been said. Couple of things to key in on. Of course, you need to trust good people. Character counts. In situations where you give discretion, discretion is only as good as the people you give discretion to. And so along with discretion comes leadership. Along with leadership comes vision. And we have to cast a new vision for justice in Hennepin County. And that has to be restorative. That has to see the whole person. That has to be, we have done some good things. They're not perfect with specialty courts and drug courts, but we do have to expand not just restorative justice, but we have to have a vision, and we have to give people tools that are more than simply punitive. And so not just giving attorneys discretion, but creating channels for future and current employment for people that are leaving the criminal justice system. All these things actually magnifies people's individual discretion. And so it's not just about discretion, but it's about empowering people and getting people that have the cultural competency and the character to use it well.
So this has been great. And to everyone who's watching at home and is like, why is this so important? I'm not a lawyer by training either. This is something that's terribly important to sort of how this office operates. But to sort of summarize, it sounds like what I've heard from everyone is hire good people, listen to them, and then it depends. Is that sort of a fair summary? Anybody disagree with that?
That's that.
Okay, I was going to give you all a chance. All right, so let's jump into something just as complicated. So we talked a little bit about public safety, and obviously a huge piece of that that's already come up is around police accountability. And so folks have talked about this a bit already, about trying to rebuild some of, or build in the first place, in some cases, trust between communities and the police. But again, I'm going to really ask you to talk in specifics about things that you can do in the office of Hennepin County Attorney to ensure that police are held accountable and to rebuild that trust between the community. And to go back to my initial question, something that you can do in that office that is unique that you haven't been able to do potentially in another office, or that office is lacking, you feel, now. So again, I'll kind of throw it out and see who is, yes, Mr. Ostrow.
So one of the biggest issues in terms of protecting the rights of defendants is Brady versus Maryland. We're all very familiar with Brady versus Maryland. And there have been a lot of concerns raised in Hennepin County. I was very instrumental in a lawsuit being brought against the Minneapolis Police Department. That lawsuit continues to allege that the Minneapolis Police Department is unlawfully hiding police discipline data. We believe hundreds, if not more, cases of serious disciplinary problems. Derek Chauvin should have been fired long before he killed George Floyd. Unfortunately, that continues to be a problem. I support law enforcement, and my own personal view is that the failures of leadership in Minneapolis, failures of mayors, councils, and police chiefs have unfairly tainted law enforcement throughout Hennepin County and Minneapolis. What I would do quickly is anytime there's a sustained violation, whether there's discipline or not, I will give a Brady notice, period. Whether or not it's been made public by the Minneapolis Police Department or not, I will make sure that the defense has that because they have a right to it.
Fabulous. Yes, go ahead.
So complaints have been made about Brady because I was making them as chief public defender and had very specific examples of it. And I know the Brady policy in the county attorney's office is to hand over Brady most of the time when an officer is subpoenaed, which is far too late and I believe unconstitutional. That information should be handed over. By the way, it's not just the police. The prosecutors have an obligation to be handing over Brady and to find out whether police have it. And what we've seen now is the county attorney's office just ignoring that. So that's a huge issue, but because you want specifics.
Yeah, I love specifics.
Okay, I'll give it to you right here. I'm going to create a police accountability unit within the county attorney's office. I'm going to create a do not call list of officers who lied in court or engaged in patterns of abusive behavior. We are going to review video footage and partner with police leadership to address violations of law and policy. When officers commit crimes, we'll charge people, and prosecutorial decisions in police brutality cases will not be farmed out to other counties. We will make them.
Thank you very much. That was a list. Do other folks either have something different or something that they want to push back on as part of that list? Or, yes, go ahead.
I have my own plan for police accountability. First of all, I believe in rule of law, just like ACS does, so that every person is held accountable to the law, whether you're an officer, a CEO, or a mailman. Second, with police accountability, specifically, the Hennepin County Attorney's Office is doing something wonderful. I know we've been like bashing it. We should talk about the good things it's done too. They have a prosecutor embedded with the Minneapolis Police Department that is assisting officers with sexual assault investigations, making sure the officers, many times we were having difficulty getting cases properly investigated in a place good enough to charge them and then also prevail at trial. What I would do is have a Hennepin County attorney, prosecutor in the Minneapolis Police Department, embedded in there, talking to them about use of force, the bare minimum standards, where we expect the law to go, and also what we expect from the community. Another thing that I want to do, because I've experienced this in my job, oh, it's time.
You finish your thought quickly, sir. Yes.
If a line prosecutor sees an officer doing something that's unacceptable on body cam video or somehow in their case, that they bring it up to management, and the top prosecutor, me, would go to the Minneapolis Police Department to talk about concerning behavior about a police officer. It shouldn't be on the line attorneys to take the heat for something that an officer has done. And sometimes it's because they're dealing with mental health issues, divorce, things that you can address right away.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes. Jeff.
Okay, in Minneapolis, we need more police officers and we need good police officers. Most of the other cities are doing quite well, and I think some of the police departments in other cities are upset because, Minneapolis is bringing bad news to them, making them look bad. I'm looking at this table, and I think I'm the only person sitting up here that voted no on the ballot question initiative. And I voted no along with the majority of my neighbors in North Minneapolis, because we knew the amendment was not going to bring the reform to the department nor the safety to our streets.
And just to say, this was the police becoming a Department of Public Safety question, just to spell that out for folks watching.
Yes. And I believe,
in Minneapolis.
Yes, and I believe the training of the officers has to be done by an outside entity. I don't think officers should be trained by the same officers that are doing some of the negative things on the streets. I think the training should be sparsed out with other entities so that they can actually change the culture. Not going to change the culture if we're training them the same as the previous officers have been trained.
So, I gave Saraswati Singh here an extra bite of this, so I'll give you another 50. Again, talk to folks watching about how in the office of county attorney, you're doing that particular work.
Okay, I can remember as when I was a county attorney, I had a police officer bring a case to me. I said I would get back to him right away in terms of a charging decision. I looked up the booking photo for the particular suspect, and I noticed that someone beat the living daylights out of him. And so I came back to that officer, brought him into my office, and this is like 16, 17 years ago. Okay, so things were a little bit different. I brought him back in my office, and I challenged him. I said, it seems to me that this person's already been punished. And I found a way, my own way, to legitimately decline the case, but not without bringing it to that officer's attention.
Okay, thank you very much. Representative, I saw you shaking, nodding, some sort of head motion out of the corner of my eye. So I'm going to give you a chance to respond here and also answer the question.
Well, sure. I think a number of the issues and opinions raised here have been pretty strong, like a robust Brady list, an independent police accountability unit within the office. And I think that's important because it is, I think the concerns about a conflict of interest or a feeling conflicted at the very least when you have to work with police officers every day and then be tasked with making an independent choice and decision about whether what they have done is something that is chargeable or not is really a lot to ask of any prosecutor. And so having some independence in the system within the county attorney's office is really important. I think there are, on the other hand, accountability for the county attorney making those decisions, as Mary has raised, is important too. So finding a balanced approach in that regard is really important. The other thing I would say about accountability is that you can do a lot of good by finding police leaders who are trying to make a difference in their communities, trying to make a difference in their police departments, and making sure that you have strong relationships with them and continue to build that kind of strong partnership. And I think what I was nodding my head about was I did not vote no on question 2 because I don't live in Minneapolis, but I did take a public position opposing that before the election took place.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to give Simon Trautmann a chance here, and then we'll go back briefly to you, Mr. Ostrow.
Thank you. There are a lot of good suggestions. Certainly a Brady list is essential. And part of why it's essential is that the county attorney leads a cohort of dozens of law enforcement agencies and law enforcement officers that all have their own particular constituencies and issues and unions that they deal with. And what the county attorney needs to do is they need to build strength through those different officers and those different units and empower them to do the right thing. As a city leader, we took a case all the way to the Supreme Court that unfortunately stands for the case that an officer can serially and repeatedly both use force in unlawful ways and fail to document it, fail to write that down. And ultimately, the Supreme Court said you still have to employ that officer. So what a county attorney can do through those lists, through an office of procedural accountability within the county attorney's office is it's not about just holding law enforcement accountable. It's a very complicated system, and we're actually have the ability to make channels of procedural justice where it's not incumbent on the will of one person, but we create a system that makes a channel for justice that particularly empowers CLEOs or chief law enforcement officers all around Hennepin County to do the work that they want to do, that good law enforcement wants.
Thank you very much. And
I'm sorry, be really quick, but we have to honor and respect the 90% of officers or more that are doing the job right, and we don't do that. 2 quick examples. I know I don't have time. There are a number of times where officers themselves have come to me, and one in particular, he said, "I'm not comfortable with the testimony I gave." And we went back in front of the court and we changed that testimony. He said, "I can't sleep because I'm not certain that I really remember what I testified to." Number 2, I had a case in the middle of the pandemic of disarming a police officer. That police officer, his gun was being grabbed the entire time and he used incredible restraint. He did not pull his weapon. I want to figure out a way we can recognize those officers who are using restraint, those officers who are respecting civil rights. We have to make sure we also honor those who are doing the job the right way. We're not doing a very good job of that.
yes, so Judge, I'll give you a chance, and then we'll come back here. That's the order I saw the hands.
I
And
think-
30 seconds, please.
Okay, I think we have to be very careful too in terms of how we're going to address this issue. I disagree with I'm sorry, Mr. Winkler's attitude that we have to go about doing this in a certain way. I think that we have to be very careful with how we talk about. I think that we need to keep those cases in the office. I don't see it as a conflict. What I've heard from many, many police officers is that we want the bad cops to be prosecuted, and they don't see it as a conflict. We want, the county attorney's office to address the issue with bad cops because they make all of us look bad. So I disagree with having any kind of outside entity or, in terms of dealing with the conflict and not, having it within the office. It should be kept in the office.
And I've got a whole question about that, but I'll go to Mary Moriarty here first.
Just because my position was mischaracterized. I do live in Minnesota, but here's one of the reasons why it's important that I'm not a politician. I did not take a position on Charter Amendment 2. Why? Because the county attorney's office represents elections in Hennepin County and was advising the city of Minneapolis on the appropriate language to be on the ballot. I analyzed it from a lawyer's perspective, and if I become county attorney, I won't have to recuse myself because I took one position or another. So I specifically want to say I didn't analyze it like a politician as other people have. I analyzed it as what should I do as a lawyer who may have to address this issue.
And I just wanted to respond and just briefly to what Paul Ostrow mentioned, that there not just are a lot of good officers. I made the decision 8 years ago to take my law practice from Eden Prairie and locate it in Elliott Park, which is where I was born at HCMC. And we were there in 2020 and in 2021, where there was functionally no law enforcement in our neighborhood. We experienced that as well. I have seen and experienced and been in part of a process of holding law enforcement accountable. I've also seen the chaos and lawlessness that comes when there is no law enforcement. We can't have an either or solution. We need law enforcement. Nobody's protected. Certainly people at the margins are not protected when we don't have a robust and integrous law enforcement.
This issue came up, and so I would actually just love to, again, open it up for everybody to talk about. But this question of under what circumstances were you Hennepin County attorney, you would decline to oversee a prosecution of a police officer, move that to another county, put that in a different office's hand. If you have thoughts about that, if you have a policy that you've already thought of ahead of time, or if you believe, no, it should be kept here in this office as a general rule. So again, just to make this simpler for folks watching at home. So under what circumstances would you make a decision to let another county attorney or potentially a grand jury take over the prosecution of a police officer? Yes.
I would never let a grand jury take over that process. Grand juries are incredibly secretive and the community doesn't trust them. I know the current county attorney's office has entered into an agreement with many counties around the Twin Cities metro area to take cases such as Jalal E, where Dakota County attorney decided, and then Winston Smith went up to Crow-Wing. Nobody elected those county attorneys to make the decision in those cases, so I think it's critically important that those decisions be made by the elected county attorney. And having said that, I understand that there are many in the community who distrust the county attorney's office, and that's one reason why having the attorney general prosecute some of these cases has been really helpful. He, however, does not have the resources to do that. He only, I think, has a couple of full-time lawyers. So, and you know, as we know in the Shoulder case, he had a bunch of volunteers, and he did a terrific job there. And I'm certainly willing to partner with him, but I will not give those cases to anyone other than me elected as county attorney.
So generally, the policy you're saying, keep it within the office.
Yes.
Potentially partner with Attorney General's office. Almost never probably outsource it to another.
Never.
Never. Okay. Were you? Yes. Go ahead.
So your question was broad. I want to just highlight that officers are just like everyone else. They get DWIs. They, you know, just the types of cases that you see. I would keep that in-house within the Hennepin County Attorney's office. Second, with regards to the officer-involved shootings, it would depend. And I know it's a very lawyer answer that you probably don't like. But for example, Mike Freeman, it was sent out, right? And people keep thinking the AG's office handled the Chauvin trial. No, they worked with the Hennepin County Attorney's office. I believe in partnerships, especially if the community doesn't believe in the leader of the Hennepin County Attorney's office. It's your job as a leader to recognize that and work with other institutions that can help you do your job. I think that was really smart of Mike Freeman to call Keith Ellison, and Keith Ellison has verified this, and work together. So I would, I'm also open to working with other counties, Washington County, Ramsey County. There's an agreement in place, and I'm open to that as well.
I appreciate you noting it was a broad question and creating some specifics around it for me. Other folks, I'm curious. Yes, Judge.
I keep them in. I do it on a case-by-case basis, depending on circumstances, the facts, and the law, and then make a decision based on that. But I would not tend to send them out.
Can you give us? Are there? I mean,
I'm not going to speculate. I think that's a terrible thing to do. What I will say is that I will take it on a case-by-case basis and look at the law and the facts of the case. And if it's a situation that does warrant some additional help, I would then seek it then. But I'm not going to say I would do it firsthand, you know, right out of the box. Each case is different.
Okay. Yes.
There's a reason we had grand juries in police cases. that we're forgetting. And that's because if you're a police officer and there's a shooting, it's a highly political case, period. And I really want to see us investigate how we can return to the grand jury, but make sure that that process, if not transparent while it's happening, while there's a full transcript and full transparency as to what is presented to that grand jury. Let me just tell you a bit about what really upset me, and that is what happened with the Washington County attorney, one of the best prosecutors in the state of Minnesota, resigned over it when, because 200 people protested at the home of the county attorney, the case was taken away from Washington County and the attorney general took over the case. I may be alone up here in saying this, but I believe that Officer Potter should not have been charged with first-degree manslaughter. I do believe that that was a politically charged decision. And none of us want to be prosecuted because of a political decision. So that's the dilemma we have. And that's one thing I want us to look at is, can we return to a grand jury process, but create a process that people have confidence in, because that's the one way to take the politics out of the decision.
Since you brought it up, let me just ask that question. Is he alone up here in thinking that Officer Potter should not have been charged with first-degree murder?
I disagree with him. That charge was added, probable cause was found. It was litigated in front of a judge. There was excellent defense attorneys for Kim Potter who litigated that. The evidence was presented at trial to a jury of 12 people, and they all agreed and found Kim Potter was guilty of that charge. I think it was reasonable to put it in front of a jury.
If there's any doubt or any question about what happened during that trial, I do agree with Saraswati. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
I do agree with her on that matter. I'm not going to second guess a case that was thoroughly tried and put through the system. Let the Court of Appeals or the Supreme Court deal. Let them correct it if there was a mistake made. I'm not going to second guess it.
I think the case does really show exactly how important it is to have some level of community trust. And I think that has to depend on a level of independence in decision making. When the Washington County prosecutor Imran Ali made that recommendation, there was a level of discretion still imposed or still within the county attorney's office and within the attorney general's office to actually pursue it, but it was a recommendation. And I think we can't take the politics out of any of these decisions. The community is distrustful of any decision, and it's not just on the left, on the right, whether you are part of a historically marginalized community or whether you feel like the police are there to serve you every day. There is a lot of distrust in these decisions, and I think only a level of independence outside of the prosecutor making that decision can preserve that level of public trust. But the main thing is, whatever process is used for making these decisions has to be vetted ahead of time with the community. People have to believe in the process, and then when the situation occurs, there is a process to follow so that discretionary decision making doesn't lead to the level of distrust that we've seen in recent years. And I think there's no substitute for having a clear process that will be triggered when these cases arise.
So, and I'm going to give you a chance, but since I had two specific things, the quick one on the Potter charging in first, I don't want to make it sort of a Ostrow versus Singh, but like, is there one of those that you're closer to?
I think I would agree with Judge Holton Dimmick that it's been fully tried. The jury made a decision, and that indicates that the charge is correct.
And then the last piece, and again, we'll give you an extra 15 seconds here about, you mentioned a process or whatnot. Can you give us any sort of clue about what are some of the things that you would look for where you're saying, you know, these would be the instances where I'm thinking we need to consider moving?
I think there should be a public agreement between the Hennepin County attorney and other metro area prosecutors. It should also involve the attorney general if possible, and if there are resources. It says when there is a potential murder or manslaughter charge against a police officer, that there will be a process for referral. It could be by lot, it could be by a type of charge, it could be any number of ways that this will be automatically transferred to another body to make a recommendation. And then I think because I think, Mary, you've raised some good points about accountability. I think ultimately the final decision comes back to the county prosecutor, but there should be some level of external review ahead of time that is vetted before the situation arises.
Okay, I will come back to you since I set you up to be sort of a question asker unfairly potentially. But I'm going to go to Councilmember Trautmann first.
Yeah, I think we've reached some consensus about the process that needs to emerge, because it's not enough to have a strong will and be accountable. That's not how conflicts of interest work. Conflicts of interest work is when there's not community trust and there's not trust within the bureaucracy. That's why it's absolutely essential that we build new systems. We just have to reckon and realize trust is broken. Trust is gone. We need to rebuild that. We can rebuild that with the Department of Justice. We can rebuild that with the Attorney General's office. We can rebuild that in collaboration with other county attorneys. Ultimately, as the county attorney, we're responsible not just for the outcome, but responsible for the process. And that process has to build trust externally and internally. So I think you could invite other prosecutors into a panel. You could partner with the Department of Justice. The outcome is not, there are multiple ways to get to that, but just saying we've forgotten about what the grand jury process is. No, we haven't forgotten. We know that process was abused for generations. So our memory is crystal clear.
So you're saying no grand juries?
No.
And
Absolutely.
are there any, and you're also Representative Winkler saying no grand juries. Can you, again, as I asked Representative Winkler, any sort of specifics where it's like, these are the instances where I'm thinking this would be part of deciding it needs to go somewhere else?
No, well, I think part of those instances, certainly if, for example, a county attorney that I worked closely with had charges filed against it, that would be an instance where this is obviously this is a partner in justice. You never want to think that something like that would happen, but of course that does happen. Those are circumstances where even if whichever decision you make, your judgment is compromised. That's the definition of a conflict, and that's why you can create systems that keep people accountable.
Okay, thank you. I've gotten a sign. It's like I need to move on to the next topic, but I promised I would give you a chance.
Well, I try to be really quick. I mean, the saddest thing after the Potter trial and during the trial is let's stop picking sides. How tragic. You can have empathy for Officer Potter, and I've been criticizing at least once Attorney General. He had some very kind words and sympathetic words, empathetic words for the officer who made an absolutely hideous mistake. But you can have empathy for Dante Wright's family and also have empathy for Officer Potter. We have to stop picking sides.
So I'm going to get criticized for this next question being somewhat broad, but yet I think it's terribly important for this office. And I'm hoping that you all, as experts running for this, can actually give us, again, some real tangible examples of things. So what are two specific things you can do to reduce racial disparities in our criminal justice system in Hennepin County explicitly with the powers of the Hennepin County Attorney? I'll go to Saraswati Singh and then to Mary Moriarty.
You asked for two things, so I'll give you two things. One, hire so that it's reflective. The Hennepin County Attorney's Office is reflective of all of Hennepin County. All genders, all races, all folks from different socioeconomic classes, people that speak multiple languages. Why? The criminal justice system has a racial inequity issue, and also our victims look like that. They are that. And just so you know, just hiring people of color is not enough. It matters what's inside and whether they have the skills to do the job. And it means also training the folks that are already there how to work with each other. We've become rather segregated in the society. Two, you cut me off on the Nixon's war and drugs. No hard feelings, I get it. So I would move prosecutors over to the violent crime unit, and I would have a convening of all different stakeholders, officers, prosecutors from within the system, folks in the community. Oh, today.
If you can finish your thought quickly.
And I would explore not prosecuting low-level drug 5 cases. So those are a small amount of drug. It's just a personal amount. It's not the amount that you would typically sell. As I mentioned earlier, drugs are the #1 type of case in the county.
Thank you. Mary Moriarty.
Yeah, first I would collect data. The prosecutor makes a lot of subjective decisions. who to charge, who not to charge, what to charge them with, whether to ask for bail, what to offer them, all subjective decisions. And because they're subjective decisions, there is the likelihood of implicit bias, which everybody has. And I'm certainly not picking on the county attorney's office. Implicit bias is everywhere. We need to collect that data, and then we need to put in place policies that remove the racial disparities from prosecutorial and decision-making. Because we're pretty sure that, and we know from studies in Wisconsin, that white people got better offers from prosecutors than Black people. So that's one thing. The second thing is, and with all due respect, I understand the divisiveness and can't we all see both sides. I just have to say the system picked sides a long time ago. And that's what we see from people when people are so upset at police. And so we have to start changing the culture of the system, which sends, we've got in prison, 30% of the people in prison are people of color, Black people, actually, which is nowhere near the population. So we have to start addressing that. I know I'm over time, so I'll stop.
Thank you very much. Yes.
Two quick things. Number one, I'm going to have more transparency than anyone in the history of the Hennepin County Attorney's Office. I want our charging decisions to be public. I want statistics about who we're charging. I want statistics about the plea negotiations. And I want to have public hearings at least once a year where we're presenting this evidence so that people have a chance to see what are the racially disparate impacts of what we're doing and what our departments are doing. Second, I'm on the Diversity and Inclusion Committee. I was the chair of it for a while in the Anoka County Attorney's Office. And one of the ideas I've been pushing is I want to get folks from the Hennepin County Attorney's Office. I really want to lead an effort to get them out into the community. Go to the food shelves, go to the mosques, volunteer. You are a public official in a public role. You need to understand your community. And I know that's asking a lot. It's asking people to volunteer. I probably can't require it, but I would hope that we could really start an effort, because that's a huge part of this, is making sure people get to know people that are different from them in their community.
Thank you very much. And just since we're at the top of the hour, I'm going to come back, but to remind everyone, the question is one or two specific tangible things you can do in the Hennepin County Attorney's Office to reduce racial disparities in our justice system right now. And Judge, you were raising your hand, and then I'll come back.
I would say hire, retain, train, and promote people of color. I disagree with Ms. Singh with regards to the Hennepin County Attorney's Office diversity composition. I think that's one of the strengths that Mike Freeman deserves credit for. He not only hires people of color, he retains them and he promotes them, contrary to what has happened in another office in our county. People of color have been promoted, encouraged, and valued, and have to do that. But let me tell you something, it's not easy to get people of color in the county attorney's office right now, because you're going to have to go outside of the box and go to the historically Black colleges in order to do that. You're going to have, a better way of communicating how well the office is doing instead of all this, tearing the office down, which I really think, I don't understand how anyone who wants to become the future county attorney spends so much time tearing the office down, which I totally disagree with. We've got to work together. We've got to stop doing that. It's not going to translate well with people that we're eventually going to be working with, and we want them to buy into our new ideas. So of course, it's necessary for us to believe in them and encourage them instead of constantly making fun of them and criticizing the work that they do. I think the prosecutors in the Hennepin County Attorney's Office do a great job. One more thing.
Oh, but I'm sorry. Okay, if you
caseloads are explosive. You can't just walk into an office and start rearranging, prosecutors. The caseloads they have are explosive. You're going to have to look at the caseloads, what they're doing, where they're doing the most work, where you can make the cuts. You just don't go around shuffling people around. That's not going to work.
Okay, thank you. And Councilmember Trumpman.
Thank you. A lot of good things have been said. Data, culture, senior leadership. I've been part of a city that grew up. We were built with racial covenants. My family was the first Latino family on our block. We are a very diverse city now. We're more diverse than the city of Minneapolis right now. And there's something that happens and transforms when cultures transform and people feel at home in community. And Hennepin County is a community and the bureaucracy is a community. We desperately need more data, and we need data around bail. We need data around sentencing. We need data around plea bargainings, absolutely. But we need to create a culture, and that culture starts with engaging and retaining, like Judge Holton Dimick said, incredibly competent, culturally competent, diverse senior leadership.
Okay, good. And I'm going to give Representative Winkler a chance to at least jump in here.
Yeah, I'm ready. Thanks.
Yeah.
So I agree on the need for data. In fact, I disagree with County Attorney Freeman. I think recently testified against a bill that would require more data collection. I think that may require more resources from the county or the state to allow that to be done adequately. And that will help address issues like implicit bias, will help address unknown or unseen decision-making that is increasing the level of disparities. I think that's very important. I think that who you have making decisions, who's in the room when decisions are made is really important. I've seen that at the legislature. It changes the conversation. But that isn't fundamentally going to change the disparities in the criminal justice system. It's one part of it. Who police are arresting, what crimes they are looking for, what the caseload is coming into the county attorney's office has a big role in the disparities that we see. When we look at communities that have been under-resourced and redlined for generations, we're seeing a system that was designed to be repressive in many ways. And until we start to address underlying causes, and this is not a short-term answer, this is a long-term answer, but until we start looking at root causes and addressing deep disparities in our society, we will not see meaningful changes fundamentally in our criminal justice system either. And I think there's a role for the county attorney to be a leader in the public safety space, saying that if we want safe communities, we have to have just communities, we have to have fair communities, we have to have equitable communities. And the only way to do that is to show up, listen, and try to find solutions. It might not be in the office, but there is a powerful role for a public prosecutor to demand a change in practices and resources across systems.
So one big theme that has come up here is around transparency and about, and so if we can do actually relatively quickly, and these would be much quicker. We got a couple. Are there specific things that you feel like the county attorney's office is not doing right now around transparency that it would be doing if you were in that office? And again, if these can be relatively like quick 1, 2, 3 kind of things, or even 1, 2. Yes.
I'll just say one thing. I've heard, as I've been talking with police chiefs and mayors, they feel like our current Hennepin County attorney doesn't talk with them before rolling out policies. So that would be something that's different. Transparent about reviewing a process, engaging with the stakeholders, and then letting them know what the decision is for the Hennepin County.
Thank you. Yes.
I've also heard from police chiefs that they want communication from the county attorney's office. But here's one succinct thing. All of you are probably familiar with Juliel Stallings' prosecution. And we know that Juliel Stallings was acquitted. We've seen the video, and various, like the reformer reached out to try to get a statement from the county attorney's office about that prosecution, and we've heard nothing. One of the problems is that the specific assistant county attorney is getting criticized for that prosecution. And I think it's the job of the county attorney to stand up and say, either that was my decision, I stand by that prosecution and here's why, or a mistake and here's why. So there has to be accountability to the public for decisions that are made.
Okay. Any other very specific things? Yes.
I wanted to agree with Saraswati that I actually, with one other attorney, led an effort to change our drug prosecution policies. Between the two of us, we met with every police department, not just the chiefs, every police department in Anoka County. There were 18 of them, we split them up. So that is not happening now, and it has to happen.
Okay, great. Yes.
I think specific, there are a number of things we can do, but specifically as we get better data, we need to share that data, not just internally, but externally. We have to hold ourselves to the accountability so that the community can see where there are disparities, we experience that pain and we address that pain together.
And I apologize, but Mr. Ostrow mentioned, releasing all charging decisions or making some of that public? Are there specific ones?
Absolutely. Well, when we look at who gets bail and how much, we don't have great information about the socioeconomic and gender and racial makeup of who gets what decision. So we need that data so the county attorney can make better decisions, the county attorney's office can make better decisions. But one way that the county attorney's office can ensure that those decisions are made in ways that I think are in line with the values of many of the county attorneys that are already there is to make that data public.
Does anybody disagree with making that data public?
The data is already public. I think that there's quite a bit of information on the county attorney's website. If you look it up under Hennepin County and look at SharePoint, you will find a lot of that information there. So perhaps maybe all of you should do that, and then you'll see. Honestly, I'm not trying to criticize or anything like that, but the data's out there. I've recently looked at it in terms of the charging decisions, whether the case is declined, whether it's deferred, whether it's charged. I looked at that information on my own.
I
It's
don't
all on the
think
website.
we have that information on bail. I may be wrong. So I'd be willing to be corrected on that.
Well, good. Oh, yes, quickly.
There is a data dashboard that is public on the county attorney's office, but it doesn't have all the data. It has shortcomings specifically about bail. One thing that's been interesting to me is we've heard a lot about bail reform, and when I've been out talking to people and door knocking, people have said to me, the problem right now is that the county attorney is letting out violent offenders without bail because of its bail policy. And I say, oh, that's interesting. I have a copy of the bail policy that was released 2 years ago, and there's not a single violent offense on it. And they say, oh, I didn't know that. And I don't believe that that's public. And I think that should be shared so that people can understand what the policies actually are. So there is a data dashboard, anybody can look at it, but it does lack information.
This might be a simple question that everyone agrees on, so it is still part of this question around reducing, well, it's more complicated than reducing racial disparities, but I am curious, is there anyone up here that would not take immigration consequences into account when making prosecutorial decisions?
Okay, I just have a tiny little issue. What I'd like to say is that we're trying to do everything equitably. People are charged equitably. People are they proceed through the system equitably on an equitable basis. So you're looking at race, religion. I think whether you're an immigrant or not, I don't think that there should be any special considerations. And I'll tell you why. The immigration issues that I've run across, not only as a judge, but as a prosecutor, they're violent crimes that they're committing. I'm talking now, I don't need you to shake your head. They're violent crimes that they actually are committing. They're rapes, they're ag robberies, they're assaults. Those cases have to be prosecuted to the extent of the law. You have to consider the facts and the law first, not whether or not the person is a citizen. I mean, that just doesn't work. And anyway, it's the responsibility of the public defender's office when a person is charged who is not a citizen to get that person an immigration attorney so that that person can get correct advice. We also mentioned before we even accept a plea, we let the person know, we have to say it generally, whether that they're entitled to have an immigration attorney before they enter a plea to consult with blah, 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 okay? I just have a problem with giving special consideration to people who are committing crimes just like anybody else, just because they're an immigrant.
Thank you for opening that wide up. I'm gonna, Mary Moriarty, and then I will come back over here. Yes.
Yeah, it is not the public defender's responsibility to get a person an immigration lawyer. Under the law, it's the responsibility of a public defender to try to advise the client, but not get them an immigration lawyer. And the people are charged with all kinds of crimes. The county attorney's office has a property and drug division. So plenty of people who are immigrants are charged with drug crimes and property crimes. We're not just talking about people charged with violent crimes. And here's the deal that I've heard from prosecutors, some are really good and do take into consideration immigration consequences. People can be deported and murdered. They come from countries where they can be murdered and their families have been murdered. Yet here they are on a drug case and they may be deported and suffer from the same consequences. So I think it's critically important that prosecutors do consider consequences of what might happen to a person. That does not mean it's appropriate in a given case, but immigrants are part of the fabric of this community. We have people who are working with kids, and so it's just, it is something that I would create a policy on, that it has to be looked at. So
Thank you.
You have to follow the law. The law has to be enforced.
The law has to be enforced. But if you're talking about an immigrant, you're talking about a person whose punishment is going to be radically different than a
That
person
is
who
not
is
the
a
decision
citizen.
for the prosecutor, though. There
It
are
is.
cases in which you can offer a lesser included crime, or they can plead to something else if it's that, if you can do that, but you can't do that if the person commits a serious felony.
The
You
question
can't
is whether
just
it should
say,
be-
okay, what do you want us to do? Just not charge it? You just don't charge the case? I mean, what is the alternative? You either charge the case or you don't charge the case. I think what you're talking about is when it comes to disposition, how you're going to resolve the case at the end of the charges. But when you're charging a case, you can't sit up there and say, oh, well, this is an immigrant, so I guess, if he did happen, to assault this person, I can't charge it because that might, lead him to being deported.
I don't
I
think
mean,
anybody's talking about somebody who is committing a serious violent crime like murder. We're talking about people who could get tripped up in a broken immigration system if a charge is inadvertently filed or a conviction is brought about that will result in deportation, which can be a consequence far beyond the crime itself. And so should it be a
Deportation is-
factor?
yeah, right.
And should it be a factor? Yes, it should absolutely be a factor that is considered.
Councilmember Trautmann?
This is something that we certainly have to deal with a lot in Richfield, that has a almost plurality of Latino folks in our city. And one thing that we've done is really look to a victim and survivor centered approach to crimes like this. One of the challenges in community is a lot of times there's either violence or theft that takes place inside a community. We want to make sure that the people who are coming forward have the ability to get the justice that they want, but not necessarily the collateral consequences that they don't want. And so really centering survivor voices, victim voices, having victim advocates, and having culturally competent victim advocates has been a key part of our leadership as a city, and that'd be something that you could expect of the county attorney's office.
And so just the answer for you, the answer is yes. Okay. Sorry, yes, and
Yes.
we're running short on time, so I am going to be crueler about timekeeping.
I'll try to be really quick. The big picture here is the collateral consequences that result from a prosecution. So I think we need to look at it beyond the issue of immigration. I'd like to see us have something that I would call pre-charge diversion. I disagree that we should not pursue low-level drug offenses. But what I would do is, rather than charging them with an offense, let's divert them at the front end, get them into treatment, get them the help they need. I can't tell you how many parents of addicts have said, thank God that law enforcement intervened. I would have lost my kid. But how can we do that in a way that doesn't taint them with a criminal record for the rest of their life? That's the challenge we have.
Saraswati Singh.
I'll be very brief. I respect all the candidates on the stage. We have a collateral consequences unit in the Ramsey County Attorney's Office. I've been part of promoting it and working with that division. If you've never had one in your office, you don't know how much good you can do. As a prosecutor, you have discretion to do alternatives like treatment. We talked about equity, there's other alternatives. And just to emphasize, just because we typically think of Hispanics as immigrants and not here legally, what I saw, especially during the Trump administration, was folks that were here legally. Their conviction from previously was used to deport them, even though they were here legally. So I just think there's so much there. It's a big topic, but I will be.
Can I just say one
Yes,
thing?
briefly.
Deportation is not triggered unless you commit a crime involving moral turpitude.
There is another area of this that, as long as we're in this area of when and how to make some of these prosecutorial decisions, and it's this question around women's healthcare decisions, and specifically Attorney General Ellison, Ramsey County Attorney Choi, and others have signed statements saying that should access to abortion and other such procedures become illegal, they would decline to actually prosecute cases, individuals under those laws, under their jurisdiction. I'm curious for folks up here, would you similarly not prosecute, were abortion to become illegal in Hennepin County, Minnesota, the United States somehow, would you decline to actually prosecute those cases, even if the law said that they are technically illegal? Yes, Judge.
I'm pro-choice. So yes, I would decline to prosecute those cases.
We might be able to do this easily, I don't know.
Judge, can you just speak up a little?
Okay, I'm sorry. I am pro-choice, so I would decline to prosecute those types of cases if it became law.
Yes, I would decline to prosecute.
I don't know what the law says, but we've talked about the rule of law. I'm pro-choice, but I think I would have to think long and hard. I hope that never happens in the state of Minnesota, but let's remember that we are a country of laws. So that is not, for me, such an easy question to answer.
I'm pro-choice, I would decline.
Yeah, I've never regretted trusting women and fighting for their dignity and their protection. And so we have a lot of resources, we have a lot of challenges, and arresting women for making a health care decision is not something that
I would also decline to prosecute and use the resources of the office to fight any effort to make abortion illegal in Minnesota.
We are just about at the end of our time, and we promised all of our candidates they would get to make a 60-second closing statement. Because we are running up against the clock, in this case, again, I apologize in advance for being cruel, potentially playing a violin to get you off, but I will do what I have to. But we will give each candidate a full 60 seconds, so I will just go opposite as I started last time. So Representative Winkler will kick us off.
All right, thanks, Tane, for pushing a good discussion into all of you. I think this is exactly the kind of conversation we've needed to have in this community for a long time. How do we pursue justice? How do we promote the rule of law? How do we promote public safety? We have an opportunity in this community to show that we are much better than we have been, not only in the past 2 years, but in the past decades. We have an opportunity to come together around a shared vision for safety for all communities, for greater justice for all communities, and we have an opportunity to build trust in our public safety system and build trust in our criminal justice system. If we fail this test, our community is going to be much worse off. But based on the conversations I've had, the communities I have been in, the people I have met, I know that there are many, many people across Hennepin County who are doing very good work every day to stop violence from happening in their community, to believe in and trust youth, to support opportunity and hope for everybody, and to reform a system that needs reform. We can do it together, and I'm excited to be part of it, and I ask for your support in this campaign, No Violence. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you again for having the opportunity to have this conversation. It's so urgent. It's so important. We have to explode the fantasy that there's one group of people that want justice and accountability, and there's another group of people that want to be safe and protected in their own homes. I'm so honored to be running with the endorsement of the last CFL endorsed candidate, Mark Hazy, with the family of George Floyd here in Minnesota. So many survivors and victims of violence, both from and against police and individual police officers. We have to have a bigger conversation. We have to have the tough conversation. We don't just need policy reform. We need to reckon and say the whole truth with what's broken, and we need to set about to repair those. I'm asking for your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Team Danger, and to the whole audience. My name is Saraswati Singh, and I'm running to be your next Hennepin County attorney. I'm a progressive prosecutor at the Ramsey County Attorney's Office. My campaign priorities are exactly what I told you earlier: public safety, police accountability, and racial equity. And I'm the right person for this job. I'm a prosecutor at the Ramsey County Attorney's Office, trying the toughest cases there, and I'm the highest level trial attorney you can be in that office. I worked at the Minnesota Attorney General's office, going to 62 counties, handling both criminal and civil cases. The Hennepin County Attorney's Office handles both criminal and civil cases. I've worked for 2 federal judges including the U.S. Attorney's Office right here in Minneapolis, working on civil rights cases. I've even worked at legal aid. I know this job. I'm the right person for this job and have the life experiences for this job. My name is Saraswati Singh, and I'm running for Hennepin County Attorney. I'm a progressive prosecutor, a Hindu, and the daughter of Indian immigrants, and I'm going to bring all of those experiences with me. Let's make history together. Thank you.
I'm running for Hennepin County Attorney because I want to do the work. I'm really excited about doing the work. I'm the only candidate up here that is not seeking a DFL endorsement, even though I served 3 terms in Minneapolis City Council as a Democrat. This is not a partisan position. It's a nonpartisan position for a reason. Because fierce political independence is absolutely necessary. Because the ability to collaborate with law enforcement and with the community, the ability to go wherever the facts take you, wherever the law takes you, wherever justice takes you, is not defined by a political party. What we need more than anything in this era of division is the person elected to this position to be a problem solver and to be a uniter. And that's what I offer you. I've led both as an elected official and as a private citizen. I've spoken truth to power. I will use all of that experience to be your next county attorney and keep you safe and make sure that everyone's rights are protected. Thank you.
Thank you for this opportunity. There's one voice that always gets talked about, and that's the voice of victims or harmed people. And I have done a lot of listening to people who have been harmed by the system, by gun violence, by proximity to gun violence, by domestic assault, sexual assault. And what I've heard consistently is their voices are not being heard. They're not being heard by the county attorney's office, and they're not being heard about what they want. As a victim of a violent crime myself, I will listen. I will listen. And I will make sure that we are incorporating trauma-based programming, that we are trying to rehabilitate people, that we incorporate restorative practices, because that's what people want. That's what I've heard over and over and over from people who've been harmed. People who are harmed become the next person who harms somebody else. So I'm asking for your support as county attorney, because I will listen. Thank you.
Thank you, Tane. Danger. I was a little concerned with the last name, but I think things went really well today. I am running to rebuild trust and restore the effectiveness of the Hennepin County Attorney's Office. We won't get there by caving to activists. We won't get there by posting on social media. Paul Ostrow, you're right. We have to do the work. That means collaborating with our justice partners, supporting good prosecutors and good police officers, and having a presence in the community. You also have to have the experience, the skill, and the desire to prosecute cases that threaten public safety. I'm not a politician. It is not a partisan office. We've got to keep politics out of that office. I want to do what I'm uniquely qualified to do, which is lead an office of lawyers that focuses on effectively prosecuting violent criminals and rehabilitating low-level offenders. That is how we make a fairer justice system and a safer Hennepin County. Thank you.
And this is your opportunity, everyone who's been holding your applause in this whole time. One time for all of our candidates for being here. Thank you so much to everyone who watched online. Thank you so much to ACS, the Twin Cities chapter of the American Constitution Society. Really appreciate it. Please, everyone who watched either here in the room or at home, keep paying attention, keep participating, and remember to go vote. If you spent an entire Tuesday night watching this whole thing, hopefully you will eventually go vote. So with that, I will say thank you all so much for being here. Thanks again to all of our candidates. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. Thank you, everybody.